Good day, everyone. I'm Krishna Karwa, a senior research analyst with iFAST Financial India Private Limited. In today's video, we will be discussing Kotak's new offering, that is the Kotak Global Innovation Fund of Fund. To shed more light on what this fund is all about, I would now like to invite Mr. Arjun Khanna, who is a vice president and a fund manager with Kotak AMC. He has over 12 years of experience in the BFSI domain and has been managing the Kotak Global Emerging Markets Fund for the AMC as well. So without further ado, let me welcome him to the call. Hi, Arjun.
Hi, Krishna. Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Glad to have you with us. At the outset, before we get started and discuss more about what the fund is all about, we'd like to know your perspective as to how important global investing is in this time and age.
Thanks, Krishna. And actually, that's a very interesting question. And thank you for actually setting up the context. Because in today's day and age, if we look at it, all of our consumption activities, we look for the best quality or the best product on a global footprint. But however, when we look at our investments, we think local. So I think there's a slight disconnect out there. And potentially, this is something that we can remedy. If we look at on a broader context, the market capitalization of India is just 2-3% of the world. So in a sense, we are as domestic investors limiting ourselves to a small part of the market when potentially the market is so much larger. And if we invest in the global markets, it gives you that diversification because when we invest in India, there's a concentration risk of some idiosyncrasies which are related only with the Indian economy. In addition, when we look at it, there are certain themes or sectors which aren't readily investable in India, largely because A, they aren't available, or two, they are in a process of getting listed. They're yet in the private equity domain at this point in time. So for a lot of our everyday usage items, say we order online for e-commerce, you have Amazon, you have OTT platforms like Netflix, or communication services such as Facebook. So by investing globally, you do get to invest in a lot of our consumption bucket, which is not relatively available out here. In addition, when one thinks about it, a lot of Indian companies are reaching global scale, but a lot of them aren't yet there. However, global markets are home to many such companies which have a global scale, a larger customer base. They get advantages of a network effect, and hence many Indian companies potentially would reach there but are not there currently, so we can get exposure to them. And lastly, I would actually say that what I've just discussed is nothing new. Everything is known to the investing public, but one issue is that it's historically been difficult to get access. There has been the LRS, which is the liberalized remittance scheme, where one can use one's cash flows to invest in global markets, but it's kind of cumbersome. Now the ease has increased dramatically with many mutual funds, including ours, coming up with products through which global investments could be done with the same ease as investing in Indian markets, obviously on the advice and partnership with their investment advisor. So with this, we believe that the ease of investing by itself has improved dramatically. And hence, it probably makes a lot of sense to invest in global markets.
Absolutely, Arjun. That's well put, the entire context. And the timing of this fund launch is definitely important, as you correctly mentioned, when advisors and investors are becoming increasingly familiar with the need to diversify and, of course, tap into global opportunities.
Sure, Krishna, I fully concur with all the statements you just made.
Okay, so Arjun, there's been a lot of talk about valuations being steep and inflation going up, interest rates likely to move up in tandem. So amid all of this chaos, what gives you the confidence to believe that equities could still be the place to be invested in?
Sure, Krishna. Actually, the reason it's actually brought a smile to my face is we are sitting in July, and if I remember correctly, last July at the same time, I actually got exactly the same question that valuations have run up. Why would you believe this would continue to run? The pandemic is yet on. And as you would remember, post March of last year, we actually saw a significant rally, and probably till date that rally hasn't yet ended, so as to speak. So in that sense, I agree with the context which you just laid out. The Fed is looking at, or has announced that by 2023, during the year, they probably would be to rate hikes. We are seeing higher levels of inflation. But let's put these numbers in context. So first, what's really driving this inflation? It's actually ironical if you break the US inflation, a very large component of it has actually come from the automobile sector. And of that, a very large component has actually come from the auto replacement market. Now, what's happened there is because of the COVID pandemic, the need for personal mobility has gone up tremendously. And because of the lack of a substitute product available where people did not want to travel as much by public transportation, you saw the need for personal mobility, and hence the used car prices going up significantly. We actually, the question that you asked me is a very apt question. You've obviously done your homework, but we posed the same question to the underlying fund management team, which is Wellington, that what is their point of view? And they seem to suggest that unless we believe used car prices will go down the vintage where maybe all used car are treated as vintage cars, you're not probably going to see stagflation, what people are afraid of. But coming more to the point in terms of the inflation, you've seen material increases in crude prices, material increases in other key raw materials. You've seen steel prices. You've seen a material sector move up considerably. And that probably is to do with the supply chain disruptions which we have seen. And it's their thought process also, while we could see crude maybe hit even 100 US dollars a barrel, but it will be there momentarily. They do not believe it to be sustainably at high levels. Their thought process is that if a lot of these prices stay at heightened levels, new supply would come to the market. If we talk even of crude prices by itself, say look at shale, in terms of output or in terms of rigs currently deployed, it's less than half of what it was at peak. And for them, the break-even point has come down considerably. So they believe, and it's our view, that crude prices, while there is room for it to move up, but sustainably, it would not move to the $100 plus levels for a long periods of time. So coming back to your question, which is is it the best time to invest, or probably is it not? It's very difficult to say, but we do believe as a thought process in terms of this theme that innovative companies would do well across business cycles, and they potentially will have excess returns within this theme because they are targeting increasingly higher market shares in total addressable markets, which are on the increasing trend.
Absolutely. In fact, that was an elaborate explanation about what is happening. And clearly, the belief at the mother fund's end is that inflation could possibly be a transitory phase, and not at this point something investors should be too spooked about.
No, perfect. You have actually summed it up really well.
Okay, hope that clarifies the point for all the viewers as well. So let's now shift our attention to the mother fund, that is Wellington. We'd like to know as to which sectors and countries is the fund really looking at this point in time.
Sure. What is interesting is that, and that's probably one of the reasons we partnered with them, is that the underlying Wellington Global Innovation Fund is a bottom-up fund. It's not a top-down fund. So when they look at investing, they do not look at countries, or they do not look at particular segments, so as to speak, of particular sectors. they look at it on a bottom-up basis. They are looking at creating a portfolio which would be, in a sense, concentrated with respect to the benchmark. So I just want to point out that their benchmark is the MSCI All Country World Index. So as on May end, it had roughly 2,898 names, and they would potentially hold between 40 to 70 names, so maybe 2.5% is what they're looking at in terms of owning names at this point in time. In terms of what countries and sectors they are bullish on at this point in time, because the net portfolio is a resultant and not is an outcome rather than inherent thought out process, because you have invested in companies where you believe you will get these excess returns with respect to the benchmark. So hence, it's not a fair way of looking at it. But since you've asked the question, maybe we can look at the key segments. So the portfolio is overweight on information technology, is overweight on consumer discretionary, communication services, and healthcare. So within the same, they are also underweight on certain segments, such as financials, such as materials. If we look at it, those would be the key underweights along with consumer staples. In terms of countries, within the geographical where companies are listed, they are most overweight on the United States, and they are underweight is largely covered by Japan and the European Union at this point in time. They are largely slightly overweight on emerging markets at this point in time. So to give you a flavor on the resultant outcome of the current portfolio construction.
Okay, so apparently, though there seems to be a fair bit of concentration, there is diversification as well, which also helps investors tap other opportunities.
Sure. And actually, if we look at the portfolio, at least as on May end, they don't own a single Indian script. So, and I also did raise that with them, that why is that the case? So they haven't quite found at compelling valuations global innovative companies in India. That doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. We are getting a lot of new listings like a Zomato, a Paytm, Cartrade, etc. But at this point in time, you'll actually get a mutually exclusive portfolio. So if this is added to your portfolio, since there are no common names, essentially you will get two mutually exclusive portfolio in terms of stocks and in terms of diversification. It would help further diversify the portfolio.
True. And of course, the bottom-up stock picking approach can come in pretty handy when different geographies are being explored.
Sure.
So talking about the US, the Wellington Fund has an exposure of nearly 70 to 75%. You know, given the fact that US valuations are quite steep, investors do have a fair bit of concern about such high exposure. So would you like to address this particular thought?
Sure, Krishna, you seem to have looked at the stock extremely closely. So yes, you are absolutely right. It's 74% as on May end. And that is a very good observation. So in terms of the world's innovation, unfortunately, majority of it has been driven from the US. Maybe because of the capital markets, maybe because of the employment structures, the open society, the net immigration of talent, etc. So hence the tilt for investments. However, this could change. If we look at it in terms of, and you're right, in terms of the listing universe, it's 74% within the North America, which is basically US and Canada effectively. But what we did was we said, since we wanted a global diversified approach, so we said, let's look at it where companies are generating revenues from. Because if one looks at it, and you're right, 74% from North America. So we went to FactSet, we inputted all the stocks within the portfolio, and we found out where these companies actually generate revenues from. You will be surprised, Krishna, that this 74% comes down closer to 50% for North American markets, and emerging markets, which are just 14% in terms of the listed entities, moves up to closer to 30%. So effectively, because a lot of these innovative companies like, say, Google's parent Alphabet, Amazon, Facebook, Netflix, while they have operations across the world and they are global companies, their place of listing is the United States primarily, and hence you do see this skewness in favor of North America. But in terms of revenue profile, it is diversified. It's exposed to all these countries across the world, which gives you a better sense in terms of where the revenues are coming from and the diversification aspect that investors are looking forward to. Uh, just to take your question further in terms of the valuation bit, and if we look at valuations, you're right, markets are at an all-time high. So effectively, people are a little perturbed that maybe this is not the best time to invest in. Uh, well, timing the market is obviously a very difficult job. But if we look at historically, the US tech sector, which seems to be, people seem to say it's in a complete bull market, and they compare it with the dot-com crash. Just want to point out earnings have increased dramatically since that point in time. During the dot-com crash, we actually saw the, in terms of forward earnings, it actually peaked at around 60, 65 levels. And currently it's trading closer to 30 times forward PER, so which is higher than the average it's traded at in the last couple of years. But in a sense, it is not close to those levels where we actually saw a crash last time around. In addition, if we look at a lot of other sectors, they don't seem to be in the same level at where IT is trading within the US market. And since they are bottom-up stock pickers, they continue to find opportunities across the market cap spectrum, even in the United States. I hope this helps to clarify.
Absolutely. In fact, it does. And though people would be investing in businesses domiciled in the US, but they are essentially investing in companies which have their wings everywhere.
Absolutely.
So true global businesses.
Sure, you've hit the proverbial nail on the head.
Yes. So apart from the US, which you clearly spoke about just now, one name that drew our attention was Brazil. And there's close to a 5% exposure out there. And we all know that the nation has been going through a fair bit of turmoil of late. And of course, it can be a volatile market of sorts. So in the context of this Latin American region, which themes is the Mother Fund really focusing on?
Sure. And that's a very astute observation. If you look at it, you're absolutely right. Brazil is large in the LATAM region, and it's a key country of focus for the fund. It's an overweight position, so as to speak, in terms of country allocation. But again, it's more bottom up rather than top down. If we talked of sectors, and you did ask me this question earlier, which sectors were overweight, underweight. So when people talk of Brazil, essentially what people are referring to is the material sector, in agri sector. That is not what's present. So the portfolio itself is underweight because it doesn't flow through in the trends which they see. So the investments within this space are also quite different. There are two very big investments of the fund in the Brazilian region. The first one is an IT company, and the second one is a financials company. So if we look at it in terms of these companies or the themes which the fund itself is looking at playing. So one obviously is by the name StoneCo, which provides financial technology solutions to merchants. And basically it helps conduct e-commerce across store, online, mobile channels in Brazil. So basically, it's more in the technology space. The second one is called XP Inc., which is a financial stock, which is in the wealth management space. So in terms of the themes that the fund is playing, obviously information technology is part of it, e-commerce, the blurring of retail of mortar and brick and mortar stores with the online stores. And the second theme is obviously the financialization of savings, the digitization of savings, and the wealth management bit is something that is being played because you're seeing a more democratization. And this company, if we look at XP Inc., has offices actually across the world where they have expanded in Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, New York, London, Geneva. So effectively, they are looking at expanding in financial services. So you're right, Brazil is a large play. but the bottom-up ideas are not so much from the traditional Brazilian businesses, but from businesses which are innovating and growing their footprint. So that's a nice catch, Krishna.
And in fact, these themes are clearly in vogue in case of emerging markets, where, of course, the headroom for growth is quite significant over the long term.
Sure.
Okay, so we'd also like to know a little more about Wellington's stock picking methodology, and what's the mother fund's approach like? Is it more large cap biased, or do they follow a multi cap approach?
Sure. Thanks, Krishna. Maybe I'll just take 30 seconds just to introduce Wellington, because since they aren't really present in India either, they've actually not really entered the country in terms of the retail market. So Wellington Management is actually an old asset management firm. They actually came up with the first US balanced fund almost 93 years back. So they have a rich history. In terms of assets under management as an entire fund house, it's 1.3 trillion US dollars. So that's roughly half of India's GDP, what we are currently at this point in time. This company is also not really as well known as because it's privately owned. It's owned by its employees who get promoted to the partner where they get equity stake in the firm. So since they are not listed, they're maybe not as well known. Now, coming to this particular product, which is the Wellington Global Innovation Fund. So this fund's thought process or the investment process is they follow the typical tenets of idea generation, fundamentals, valuation, and portfolio construction. Now, when we talk of our thought process, Kotak's thought process, we always talk about that BMV approach, business management valuations and growth at a reasonable price. So they also follow a similar approach. But given that this is a thematic fund, so the idea generation is only for stocks which actually follow through in this theme. And that's where they actually get their collection of ideas. The next part of it is their fundamental analysis. And here they look at what they call the TIBR methodology, which T stands for trends, I for innovation, B for barriers, and R for risks. And risk cuts in the overall score, what is created by TIB, the first three aspects. We could go into that in slight detail in the next couple of points. So using this, and then they come to valuation. Now, I just want to point out here that investing in innovative companies is not the same as investing in traditional businesses. The key reason is that, say, probably one of the biggest winners we have seen till date, Amazon, for the large part of its history as a listed company, it was always in losses. And it's only in the past 5 years we have actually seen profitability increase. And actually the last 5 years have been extremely good, where the CAGR of EPS growth has been almost as high as 69%. So that's been good for them. But when you're investing in innovative companies with a bottom-up approach, essentially you need to look at it for a longer-term time horizon with a number of angles, including market size, market share, margin possibilities over a period of time. And you look at relative PE ratios rather than an absolute number compared to traditional companies. Coming to the TIBR methodology that they use. So T stands what I talked about, trends, where you look at the total addressable market. I'm sure all of us will hear this term a lot more since the likes of Zomato's, Cartrade. So basically they score the trend number, understand how big it could get. Secondly, they score the innovation part of it, looking at companies who out-innovate and continuously overweight their peer sets. So if we look at one large holding within the fund, Alphabet, which is the parent of Google. So Google initially came with a search engine. They moved on to making an email system. Post that, they went into the Android ecosystem, mobile phones. Now they're entering even the Chrome operating systems and entering desktops, laptops. So there's a continuous evolution that you're seeing. The third aspect, which is barriers. Basically, these are barriers to entry which enable competitors to not enter this space. Now, this could either be IP driven, you may have some technology where you have a patent, or it could be expertise, maybe your brand is so strong, or you have a very large scale. So all these aspects create what they help to create the score. And then there's the risk to this trend, the risk of being disrupted, of something new coming in and spoiling this trend or creating a new trend. So overall, they look at an overall score, and post that, they create the portfolio, which is what they use for their overall investments. In terms of the risk part of it, and it's a very important point that you have raised, they do look at no stock being more than 10% of the portfolio. So while it would be a concentrated portfolio, no single stock would be more than 10% of the portfolio. Apart from the fund management, where we have two fund managers who have more than 40% of overall experience with the firm and in the markets. So Michael Mazdia and Brian Barbetta. So both of them are partners with the firm, co-owners of the firm, and they manage the fund. And it's their thought process that they look at low churn. They look at that concentrated 40 to 70 stocks. And in terms of risk management on top of them, apart from the usual risk managers above them, they also have an independent Wellington Risk Advisory Council that helps to keep a check into whether they are being consistent in terms of risk, stress testing, and portfolio analysis, etc. The last part of your question was the focus of the fund in terms of a particular style of investing. So if we look at it, globally, stocks with a market cap of more than 50 billion US dollars are considered large caps. Small caps may be between 7.5 to 10 billion. And between large caps and small caps are the mid caps. So this fund is completely market cap agnostic, since they're bottom-up stock pickers. They are okay with investing across the market cap chain. And to just give you a sense that obviously you cannot be an index hugger with just 40 to 70 stocks when your index has 3,000 stocks approximately. But if we look at the alpha, so this fund over the last years since inception has had 1,200 bips or 12% of alpha per year, CAGR. Only half of its alpha has come from large caps, so $50 billion and above. And half of its alpha has come from small and mid caps, with the vast majority of that coming from small caps. So since small caps is an important component because they are bottom-up stock pickers, that gives you a sense on them not being focused towards any market cap, but being more focused towards where they believe they would get excess returns. So this is a slightly long-ended answer to your short question, but I hope this helps.
In fact, it does, and answers a lot of questions that people would have otherwise had in the context of Wellington, which of course is a relatively unheard of name, but clearly with the expertise and its potential to generate alpha, it is definitely a force to reckon with, quite on similar lines as Kotak AMC as well.
Sure, thanks for your kind words.
So another important question that we wanted to touch upon is that now innovation has become the norm across sectors. It's not specific to tech alone. And every company in a way innovates in order to make itself bigger and better. So keeping this factor in mind, how different is this particular fund going to be versus the other multi-region, multi-sector funds that we have in India?
Sure. Thanks, Krishna. I think this is a very, very important question which you have raised, and it's actually essential to this process by itself. So we believe, and when we look at innovation, so most people are of the opinion that innovation basically means IT, possibly to some extent means healthcare. We believe innovation is different. Essentially, innovation is either a new process, a new way of doing something. Yes, it can be a new product also, but essentially it is a business proposition that helps you to increase your market share or increase your total addressable market. So it doesn't have to be in this aspect. So we will not be, so as to speak, in a narrow mold of just being a pure IT, which we discussed the earlier sectors, or just an healthcare. In terms of the key themes that, or the underlying themes that it's playing, the fund is actually playing multiple themes. There are over 8 themes at this point in time, which the fund believes should play out over a period of time. And most of the bottom-up ideas fall under the buckets of these themes. So probably I'll just take a minute and help us understand what are the key themes the fund is aiming at this point in time. So the first theme is the automatic evolution. So the movement towards electric vehicles, new energy vehicles, autonomous driving, the shifting of supply chains. Next, you are going to have a connected world. Incrementally, most of us are looking at connecting with each other through the mobile. So mobile advertising, on-demand media. Climate change is something that is upon us. We read every day in the paper. So lending towards it, renewable energy. There is democratization of finance as a theme that this fund does want to play, looking at digital banking and smart beta investing, shift towards fee-based, the new retail, the blurring of offline and online. And being in India, we actually see that live examples in front of us. So these are not just global themes. Incrementally, consumer preferences are shifting more towards having experiences versus purchasing things, and how does one play that in terms of artificial intelligence, machine learning, automation. So that's one important theme that the fund is targeting. And obviously healthcare and innovation, where incrementally the cost of medication is coming down, and along with it a lot of rare diseases are being treated. So these are the key themes that they are looking at playing. In terms of your question as how is it different, so this fund is looking through its TIBR methodology to identify stocks. And it is the belief that these innovative companies potentially, while some may look at it as a theme of innovation, I think this is, since it's diversified across geographies, it's diversified across sectors, there's no undue emphasis on one sector. Essentially, this can be compared with a global multi-sector. But this philosophy, if it does play out the way we anticipate,
the mother fund's track record also would be quite reassuring for investors. And you spoke about so many themes which actually amazed me as well. So some names I've never heard of, and I'm sure a lot of others haven't either. So it's a good opportunity to participate in innovation across sectors.
No, absolutely. And we too, if you look at it, had come out with a product for the Indian markets called the Kotak Pioneer Fund. We did launch it a couple of years back, and potentially are growing the total addressable markets because of potential margin growth, earnings growth, will continue to have excess returns with respect to the underlying traditional businesses.
All right. So we did touch on at length on topics or every query related to the mother fund. Now let's speak about the feeder fund, which is Kotak AMC. A couple of primary questions that I have in mind. So at the outset, what percentage of the portfolio would be kept aside as cash, given the fact that valuations are already quite steep as of now?
Sure. So, Krishna, actually, that's a very good question, and thank you. I should have covered it, but yes, you are right. So, there are two aspects to this. Just want to point out, and when you asked about risk of the fund, I should have also mentioned it. So, the underlying fund, which is the Wellington Global Innovation Fund, they would not be taking cash calls. They would be invested in the market because they believe over coming to us, we ourselves do not take cash calls, and we don't take cash calls across the funds we manage. So we would be invested at all points in time, typically between 95 to 100% at our level also. Traditionally, we have kept lesser amount of cash than we are allowed, largely because we want to mirror the performance of the underlying fund. So we would have very little amounts just to take care of the inflows and outflows on a regular basis. But essentially, we would be fully invested. One of the key reasons for Kotak for this philosophy of not taking cash calls is that we do not have access to the underlying investor's portfolio and his risk profile, which his partner, the investment advisor, does. So they are at a better position to specify how much exposure do they actually need. So hence we are true to label in all the products that we manage.
And in fact, that will play a key role in minimizing the tracking error as well going forward.
Absolutely. Perfectly, you're right.
So you did answer all the questions pretty well, and that I'm sure will clear a lot of doubts that investors might have. So I'll again ask you if you have any concluding remarks in the context of this fund or global investing as a concept.
Sure, Krishna, probably it would make sense to end where we started in
Yes.
terms of global investment. So we do think that diversification of investments in global markets helps increase the risk-adjusted return of the portfolio. So you would get a risk-adjusted higher portfolio if you have diversification across sectors, across countries. Uh, we believe that limiting ourselves to just 2-3% of the global market cap in this day and age where there is an ease of investing abroad may not be the optimal solution for many of you. And hence, we believe that global investing does make sense. In terms of this fund, we are positive in terms of this innovation theme. We believe that exposure to companies and these themes tend to be underrepresented in traditional strategies. Hence, innovation can drive growth independent of the global economic cycle.
Okay, so thank you so much, Arjun, for giving us this comprehensive explanation and taking out time, uh, answering every question at length. And I'm sure a lot of viewers watching this will find this product quite interesting and the process quite reassuring as well.
Sure. Thanks, Krishna, and really appreciate your time and your research that you have actually probably it shows with the level of in-depth questions you have. So thank you so much for this.
We are glad to host you, and we shall look forward to connecting with you soon then.
Sure. Thank you and have a
And
good day.
you too, Arjun. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.